of Rochester. Since entering office, Senator Cooney has made affordable housing and anti-poverty initiatives some of his top priorities, pushing for policies like the Housing Access Voucher Program to reduce homelessness and bring more stability for his constituents. He's been a strong supporter of PCHO and the vital work that they do in the community. So, ladies and gentlemen, here's Senator Cooney.
Well, good evening, everyone. Good evening. It's great to be with you, and thanks for that kind introduction, Berkeley. And I'm just so pleased to be able to be home and to be back from Albany. In fact, when we were putting this together and trying to get everything scheduled, Nick was sharing the date with me, and I said, I have to be in New York City, and I said, there's no way I'm going to miss this event. Mostly, not only because I love PCHO, but mostly because Nick asked. And for those of you who don't know a little bit about our background, I've known Nick for a long time. We went to school together here in the city of Rochester. We're both proud graduates of the School of the Arts. And I know there are a couple of Soda alums here tonight. Sala Shara is here. Sarah Evans is also here. And we have Coach Iglesias here. So we're very loyal to each other at School of the Arts and in RCSD. And I wouldn't want to miss this opportunity to be with you. It's interesting, just kind of off the cuff, being in New York City over the last 24 hours, with what has transformed in New York with the Democratic primary win of Zoran Mondani. Things are changing. And Chuck commented in his welcome remarks that things at the federal level have changed, which are alarming and creating some uncertainty and instability when it comes to housing in our communities. But to have a colleague and a peer of mine in the State House, 33-year-old Indian American, to be elected as the youngest mayor of New York City in a generation, who made housing his linchpin in running for office. Things are changing across New York. Things are changing across the United States of America as we recognize that housing first is not just a statement, it is a value that is believed by the majority of Americans. And as we're going to talk about briefly tonight, the work that is taking place here in our own community in Rochester because of PCHO is so incredibly important. Housing, as you all know, is about stability. How can we expect members of our beloved community to thrive if they do not first have access to stable and reliable housing? And that's exactly what PCHO and their Housing First approach is trying to bring to our community and has successfully brought to our community over the past 10 years. PCHO understands that it's easier to improve health outcomes, to search for a job, to recover from addiction, if an individual knows that they have a roof over their head and that they have the support of a loving neighbor. And their approach allows our neighbors, individuals, to truly become the best versions of themselves. And when Chuck was talking about his ingredients, the one, in addition to family, that he highlighted that was important to me is compassion. Compassion is the magic ingredient for PCHO. And it was compassion that led Nick and Chuck and their amazing team here tonight that has fueled the success over the past decade. And it's been an honor to follow you in your journey as you have come along to kind of breaking the model, disrupting the model for housing. Many of you know that housing continues to be a top discussion item. We just finished an exciting mayoral primary, a city council primary here in Rochester, but we've been talking about housing in that context as well as at the state level. And since entering office, hard to believe, 5 years ago, each year we have been working on housing and making it a priority. And the reason why is that we have data and rent studies that show that nearly half of the renters here in Monroe County are rent burdened. Now notice I said Monroe County, not City of Rochester. Because sometimes people like to talk about housing as a city issue. It's a community issue. And so whether you're on the west side or the east side or in our center city, housing is a human right. And when we recognize that half of our renters in Monroe County are rent burdened, what does that mean? That means that they're spending over 30% of their monthly income toward rent. We will not break a generational cycle of poverty if people are spending 30% of their income on housing. Families cannot afford to send their loved one to college or put their aged one into long-term care or to save to start a new business if they are spending 30% of their household income on rent. How can we expect someone who is experiencing homelessness to find stable housing if we don't have the necessary supports in place? And that's where PCHO has come in to support our community time and time again. Over the past decade, they've housed over 2,000 individuals and families in permanent housing programs, maintaining, this is where I think is a pride point for us to focus on PCHO versus some of the other organizations. PCHO has maintained 93% housing retention rate for their placements. That's incredible. Nick and I were talking during dinner that it's not just about having a room or a roof. It's about that support that's consistent. There's a difference between checking in on somebody and supporting somebody. And PCHO is supporting people, making sure that as their needs change, the services change with them. And that's the type of model that we need, both in government, in not-for-profit work, and community development work. I want to talk about some of the work briefly that is happening, and Berkeley touched upon it briefly. Some of the work at the state level for policies that we're working on, we made some good progress just this spring, that will impact the work that PCHO and others are doing here in Monroe County. As Berkeley mentioned, I've long supported something called the Housing Access Voucher Program. How many of you have heard of that program, Housing Access Vouchers? It is a program that works very similar to what we see on the federal level with Section 8 vouchers. So it's the state version of that, easing the financial burden for those at risk of homelessness, keeping people safe in their homes so they don't have to experience homelessness. What these housing access vouchers do is they cap the amount an at-risk individual or family put towards their income. So we talked about that 30% amount. It would cap it so that you're not spending more than that 30% and help supplement your wages to allow people to stay in their apartments. Because what we know is it's a lot easier to keep people safe where they are than to move them into a shelter or to have them experience this homelessness on the street and then try to find a space for them afterwards. Keep families together. Keep people safe. That's the key here. And we know that there has been some languages reported on CNN and some bills that have been coming before Congress where they've talked about stopping the Section 8 program. That would be devastating here in Rochester and across New York State and certainly across the United States. So the state of New York is stepping up, and for the first time we put tens of millions of dollars to launch a new housing access voucher program this year that will go into effect next year. So we're going to work with PCHO to get that done. I'm also very proud to co-sponsor legislation. Some of you may have heard about it. I wrote an article about it in the Rochester Business Journal a few weeks ago called the Faith-Based Affordable Housing Act. And what this is a common sense measure that I believe could bring real relief to our community in Rochester. Many, especially since COVID, many houses of worship and faith organizations are at a crossroads. They see smaller congregations Maybe they have large facilities that they're not utilizing as much. Maybe they moved to an online worship experience, and so they don't need to have as many pews as they did before. But often case, what we see is a lot of our faith communities are what we consider to be land rich, but cash poor. So they have these big plots of land, many of which are just empty fields. Well, we also know that we need more housing and more affordable housing in our community. So what this bill would do, it's a win-win. It would ease the zoning laws to allow these faith-based organizations to build affordable housing options on their existing property while helping to generate resources to keep them serving the community, many of whom are doing wonderful charitable things, and allows them to kind of continue to operate, but also creates more available beds and houses and units for Rochesterians. Now, I know that if we don't act now, we're going to be too late. We have to meet the moment. We have to listen to what the community is telling us, which is they need more housing now. This just seems common sense. Let's get rid of the parking lots, get rid of these empty fields, and let's make sure that we're building housing that people can live in and feel comfortable. But we also know that fighting homelessness takes a holistic approach, and many of you in this room have been doing the work for years, and God bless you. Thank you so much for all you've been doing. It takes, like PCHO, on-the-ground work, talking to people face-to-face, meeting people where they are. And that's why I'm so grateful for the work that PCHO does. We, of course, need to assist people who are currently experiencing homelessness, but we also need to prevent that homelessness I talked about before. So this year we added $55 million in the state budget for eviction legal assistance. Now, I'm a lawyer by training, and what I've been so frustrated with by is that many times working families who are working 2 or 3 jobs, whose kids are in RCSD or in suburban school districts, they're just trying to hold it together. So the thought of having to go find a lawyer, pay for a lawyer, and show up to fight a bad landlord, or to keep, to say, look, I can't afford this, but I've made payments towards my rent, I'm abiding by my lease. They don't have legal representation, so they go into the courtroom empty-handed. That's not fair. And by the way, that doesn't happen in New York City, and it sure as heck is not going to happen in Rochester, New York. So we're going to put the money to hire lawyers to make sure that everyone who's going through these housing disputes has representation so that their voice can be heard. So Chuck talked about that while we have our challenges, tonight is really about a celebration, because there's a lot of good things happening. A lot of good people who care about our community, who believe in the city of Rochester and the county of Monroe, and who want to see more families stay here, send their kids to schools, get jobs here, and then raise their own families in our region. So tonight is not just a recognition of the work that's been done, but it's a sneak peek preview of the work that we're going to do together. So with that, let me just share one final anecdote. And I told Nick I was going to do this. 10 years ago, we were talking about, where were you 10 years ago? 10 years ago, I was serving as Mayor Warren's chief of staff at City Hall. And my good friend from high school, Nick Coulter, walked in and said, can we grab coffee? I have this idea. I want to talk to you about. And I said, well, you're a School of the Arts alum, so you already got my heart. Let's do it. And we went to Boulder Coffee, and we sat down, and he said, we're going to remake housing in Rochester, and we're going to do it with love and compassion. And Chuck and Nick told me about their plan to start an organization, which of course became PCHO. And so I just have to say, as a Rochester hometown guy, and someone who's been in public service, public office for a number of years, I'm just so proud of the growth that person-centered housing options have had. And I just know that the future of Rochester is because of people like you, Nick, people like Chuck, and everyone in this room. Because if we are good neighbors, then we'll have good communities. And if we have good communities, then we'll have a good state of New York. God bless you. Thank you so much. didn't come empty-handed. I do have a proclamation with me for New York State, so if my colleague and friend Amanda could join me here. I'll ask Vic if you could come up. I know Chuck is celebrating his son, but let us celebrate you both. I'm not going to read the whole thing, don't worry. But I do think it's important to recognize a couple of key points. So this is a proclamation from the State Senate in preparation for tonight, celebrating the 10th anniversary of person-centered housing options. And let me say this. Whereas, attendant to such concern, I, New York State Senator Jeremy A. Cooney, am justly proud to honor PCHO upon the occasion of its 10th anniversary, celebrating a decade of compassionate service, advocacy, and innovative housing solutions that has changed thousands of lives across the city of Rochester and Monroe County. And whereas PCHO's work has fostered impactful collaborations with local governments and state governments, and including work to include street outreach, case management, veteran support, harm reduction strategies, assisting individuals, thousands of individuals and families on their journey from instability to independence. What is it that you don't do? That's the question. Whereas this milestone anniversary not only reflects PCHO's enduring commitment to advocacy, equity, and direct service, but also, and this is important for all of us in this room, but also makes a renewed call to action to end homelessness in Rochester for good. Proclaimed here tonight that we commend and celebrate PCHO on the occasion of their 10th anniversary to honor the extraordinary impact it has had over the past decade in creating stronger, more compassionate Monroe County. Congratulations to PCHO.